Welcome back to the deep dive. We often talk about international business in terms of the flashy stuff.
Right, the strategy, the marketing.
Exactly. Or maybe the cultural etiquette like, don't shake hands with your left hand. But we rarely talk about the actual operating system that makes it all function.
And you don't mean Windows or Mac.
No, not at all. I mean the plumbing.
The unsexy, invisible plumbing that actually keeps the whole building from flooding.
That's it. And today, we're diving into something that, on the surface, sounds incredibly niche, but is, I think, a fascinating case study in just how complex the world is.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a whole stack of documents about localizing the osFinancials and TurboCASH accounting software for the French-speaking market.
And when we say French-speaking market, we're definitely not just talking about a bakery in Paris.
Not even close. We've got technical roadmaps, we've got GitHub repositories, and these really deep analyses of something called the Plan Comptable General.
Right.
And our mission today is really to unpack why translating software isn't just swapping English words for French words. It's about translating entire legal frameworks. Because if you get a word wrong in a novel, a reader might be, a little confused.
Sure. But if you get a word wrong here, you break legal compliance. You could literally have tax authorities knocking on your door. The stakes are just incredibly high.
So let's start with the scale of this.
Yeah.
We're looking at a file. It's called francais.dfm.
The language file.
Right, the main language file.
Yeah.
And it has over 4,071 labels. That's 4,000 individual pieces of text that need to be perfect.
And you can't just run it through a translation script.
No, that was my first thought, which I held before reading all this. Just, invoice becomes facture. Date becomes date. Done.
If only. The real problem is that English accounting terms are often, they're functional, almost colloquial.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas French accounting terms are legalistic, they're actually defined by statute.
The sources gave a perfect example that I really want to dig into, is the phrase set of books.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
So in the English version of the software, you open a set of books. That's your company database.
Right. It's a colloquialism. It comes from the old days of, physical ledgers sitting on a desk. You had a literal set of books.
So if you translate that literally, you might end up with dossier comptable, which means an accounting file. And that's comptable. It's okay. It's understandable.
It's understandable, but the sources argue it's wrong. Because a file, a dossier, it sounds like a manila folder or maybe a single spreadsheet.
Like one document.
Exactly.
Right.
But a set of books in the software is the entire database. It's all the tables, the journals, the ledgers, the history. It's a whole system.
So what's the correct term?
The recommendation in the documents is to use the term jeu de livre comptable.
Jeu de livre comptable. It just sounds much more formal, much more substantial.
It is. It literally means a set of accounting books, and it captures that idea of an integrated collection. It's the difference between asking for a piece of paper and asking for the whole library.
And if you use the wrong term, the user, who's probably a trained accountant, might think they're just opening a subfile, not the whole company database.
It creates a completely false mental model of the software.
That nuance is just wild. And it's not just the words, right? The sources also mentioned the visual style. There was a note about shifting the user interface to sentence case.
Yeah, to match Microsoft Office standards.
Why does that matter so much?
It's all about user trust. I mean, think about it. Most accountants live in Excel. That is their native habitat. If your software looks like it was designed in a garage, if it uses weird capitalization, like title case on every button.
It feels clunky. It feels like, hacker software or something.
Exactly. It feels foreign. By just cleaning that up, matching Microsoft's style, they're reducing the cognitive load. They're making the tool disappear so the accountant can just focus on the numbers.
Speaking of cognitive load, let's talk about open item. This one was great because in English, item can mean a physical thing, right? A product on a shelf.
But in accounting?
In accounting, an open item is usually a transaction that hasn't been settled.
It's a financial state, an unpaid invoice.
So if you just translate open item as article, which implies a physical stock item, you've totally misled the user. The sources show a correction for open item link. They change it to réaffectation des articles en suspens,
which is roughly relinking outstanding items. That word, suspense. In suspense, that's the key. It tells the accountant these are unsettled financial items, not physical products.
That precision prevents a huge mistake. And then there's the bug that actually broke the software. the receipt versus receipts issue.
Wow, this is a classic coding nightmare. So you have label ID 1100, which was receipts, singular, and label ID 2233, which was receipts, plural.
One letter difference.
One letter to a developer, yeah.
Right.
But in the software, receipt, the singular, was for the print receipt command, printing a slip of paper for a customer.
Okay.
But receipts, plural, referred to the actual journal where you record all the money coming in.
And the source says because of a mix-up in the translation IDs, when someone tried to print a single receipt, the software was displaying the wrong header.
It was displaying the journal label, receipts. So the user is thinking, am I printing a document or am I opening a ledger? In French, the piece of paper is a reçu. The journal is encaissement. You cannot use the same word.
So language and code are just totally intertwined. But let's move from the interface to the engine room. The sources talk a lot about the PCG, the Plan Comptable General. Now, I just assumed everyone categorizes money in, basically the same way. Money in, money out.
Oh, absolutely not. And this is the biggest culture shock for, say, an American or British developer. In the U.S., there's no single legally required chart of accounts. You can mostly number your accounts however you want.
Really, it's a free-for-all.
I mean, within reason, yes. You can have an account called Coffee and Donuts and call it number 5,000. But France is different.
They have the Plan Comptable General.
And it is a rigid, legally mandated chart of accounts. You must use the structure.
The sources describe it as a decimal-based hierarchical numbering system. It sounded like the Dewey Decimal System for money.
That is the perfect analogy. It's exactly like that. It's incredibly organized. The source outlines the main classes. Class 1 is always capital and equity. Class 2 is always fixed assets, buildings, machinery.
And Class 6 is always expenses. Class 7 is always income.
Always. So if you're a French accountant and you see an account number starting with a 6, you instantly know that's money leaving the company.
No question.
And it goes deeper. The software has to be hard-coded to respect it. A 3-digit account might be a main category, and then you add digits for specifics. So 6006 might be non-stored purchases, and 6064 could be office supplies.
It's not a suggestion, then. It's the law.
It's the law. You cannot produce a statutory balance sheet, a bilan, without mapping your data to these classes. If your software lets a user create an expense account that starts with a 7,
which is for income,
you've broken the logic of the entire national economy. The software simply cannot allow it.
Which brings us to the part of the documentation that seemed the most terrifying to me, the VAT, Taxe sur la valeur ajoutée.
The beast.
The sources call it the most technical part of the whole project. In the UK or the US, you might just have one sales tax payable account. Simple.
Very simple. France is not simple. In many systems, you have a single VA control account. Money in, money out, you pay the net. France separates everything into a trinity of accounts.
The trinity. Okay, walk us through that.
Okay. First, you have account 4457, TVA collecte. That's the VAT you collect on sales, a liability.
Got it.
Then you have account 4456, TVA deductible. That's the VAT you paid on your purchases, an asset.
So one bucket for VAT I collected, one for VA I paid, and they stay separate.
They stay separate until the end of the period. Then you net them out into the third account, 4445, TVA à décaisser. That is the payable balance. That's the actual check you write to the government.
So the software has to automate that flow.
It has to. And if your software just has one big VAT bucket, you're doing it wrong. You fail the audit. But then it gets even more complex with the rates. The source lists distinct accounts for every single rate.
Right. There's the standard rate at 20%, reduced at 10, super reduced at 5.5.
And then the specific rate at 2.1%.
2.1%. What on earth is taxed at 2.1%?
The source mentioned things like refundable medicine, some press publications, and the software has to track how much VAT was collected at 2.1% versus 5.5%. You can't just lump it all together.
Wow. Okay, but there was one concept in the VAT section that actually made me go, aha. It was the auto liquidation.
The reverse charge mechanism. Yeah, it's brilliant.
It sounds like something from a sci-fi movie, but it's an accounting trick for the EU.
It's crucial for cross-border EU trade. So let's say a French company buys software from a German company. The German seller doesn't charge German VAT.
So the French buyer gets it tax-free?
No, because that would be unfair to French sellers. So the French buyer still has to report the transaction to the French tax authorities.
But how did they do that if no tax was actually paid?
Auto liquidation. The software essentially debits and credits the VAT at the same time. You debit an account like 445620, deductible VAT, and you credit an account like 445740, VAT due.
So
Yeah.
You're adding 100 and subtracting 100. The net effect on your cash is 0.
Exactly. Zero cash leaves your bank. But, and this is the key, the transaction is recorded, the tax authority can see it, the software has to have these specific accounts and labels ready to go.
That's fascinating. It's basically accounting judo. You use the transaction's own weight against itself to satisfy the law.
That is a great way to put it.
Now, we've been talking a lot about France, but the sources make a huge point that this project is massive because it's not just about France.
Right, it's about the OAD connection.
This is where the story gets really global.
It goes from European bureaucracy to African commerce. OHADA stands for the Organization for the Harmonization of Business Law in Africa. It's a coalition of 17 countries, mostly in West and Central Africa.
The list was huge. Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire.
It's a massive economic bloc. And they realized having 17 different legal and accounting systems was a nightmare for trade, so they created a single system.
Called Susquehanna?
And Susquehanna is heavily based on the French PCG. It uses the same class structure, the same logic.
So when the developers localized the software for French, they weren't just unlocking the market in Europe.
They were unlocking the market for this entire African bloc at the same time.
The sources mentioned language dynamics there. It listed countries like Cameroon, which is bilingual English and French.
And Rwanda, too.
But the source insists that for statutory accounting, French is often the primary driver.
It is. That's the legacy of the legal systems. Even if you speak English in the office in, say, Bamenda, Cameroon, the law that governs your balance sheet, the OHADA Uniform Acts, is rooted in that French tradition.
So the francais.dfm file becomes a compliance tool.
It's a passport. It allows the software to travel across borders and function legally in 17 different countries. Without that specific localization, the software is just a toy, not a business tool.
I want to circle back to the quality control section because there were a few more translation gems. The point of sale terms, the shift logic.
Oh, right. In English retail, you start and end your shift. If you translate shift literally into French, you get, well, nonsense.
What's the right term?
The correct term in a work context is post, like a position or a station.
And cash up.
Another very Anglo phrase, time to cash up. The formal term is clôture de caisse.
Closing the till. It sounds so much more final.
It is. And this is where UI constraints come in. French is often much longer than English. Cash up is short. Clôture de caisse. It's like a long button.
You can't fit that on a small screen.
Exactly. So the translator has to become a UX designer, figuring out how to abbreviate it without losing the meaning.
And they had that mix up with X.
Oh, that was a bad one. X usually stands for expenses, which they translated as dépenses. But in one specific context, X actually meant expected.
Oh, no.
So they had to correct it from dépense, which is money out, to prévu, which means forecast. Imagine getting that wrong. You're telling the user they spent money when they were just projecting a date.
It's just amazing. We started this looking at a list of file names, and we've ended up exploring the legal structure of France, the economic unity of West Africa.
It really proves that software doesn't exist in a vacuum. I mean, code is math, but the interface is culture.
Code is math, but the interface is culture. I love that.
When you look at all the work that went into this, mapping the PCG, splitting the VAT accounts, it's clear that software localization is really cultural and legal porting.
You're porting the legal system directly into the code.
Yes. You have to understand why an accountant in Paris books a trade differently than one in London. It's not just debit and credit. It's debit according to whose law.
It makes you appreciate all the invisible work. We just click print report and assume it's right.
But someone had to decide if that report was a bilan or a compte de résultat. And if they hadn't, that button would be worse than useless. It would be dangerous.
So here's a thought to leave everyone with. We live in this world that's obsessed with automation, with AI writing code, with software being plug and play globally. But if accounting languages are so deeply tied to national laws, this rigid French PCG versus a flexible US system, can global software ever truly be plug and play? Or will the human translator, the person who knows that set of books is a jeu de livre and not a dossier, always be the most critical part of the code?
I think as long as nations have borders and laws, that dream of a universal business OS is going to remain just a dream. You'll always need that human bridge.
The code can calculate, but only the human can interpret. Something to mull over. Thanks for diving in with us.
My pleasure.
See you in the next one.